My neighbor gave me 40 starfruit. I don't really know what to do with 40 starfruit. So I decided I would try making some jam. First thing you got to do with starfruit is trim the ends off. And this end has a little stem, so we have to go a little bit deeper. And the other end doesn't have a stem, so you could actually leave that if you wanted to. Then these ridges get a little dark, so I cut them off in any really, really soft spots. I also cut off. Now, funny story, I just started eating starfruit about 3 weeks ago when the same neighbor gave me some. Okay, after we trim those edges off, then we slice it into pieces about 1/4 of an inch thick. Much thinner than this, they're too floppy to work with. Then you got to look at each slice and take the seeds out. Look at both sides because they sometimes hide. There's not a ton of seeds. It's just enough to be a lot of work. There's 38 starfruit here, and it took me about an hour to trim them, slice them, and get rid of the seeds. And I have never had starfruit jam before. So I'm hoping it's as good as the starfruit itself is. And to that end, I'm not going to use a lot of sugar because I don't want sugar covering up the flavor of the starfruit. And I've got a recipe planned for the next show that's going to use this jam. So I'm hoping it's really good because it's going to ruin my whole show otherwise. You can see there's not a terrible lot of seeds in here. But they don't really, they're kind of sticky. So you don't really want to let go right off the bat. Now they call this a starfruit. This one isn't very representative of its name. But they call these starfruit because they look very much like a star. If you want the recipe for this or any other Gringo Baker food, you should go to our Discord. There is a section there called the recipe box. And in that recipe box will be PDFs that you can print in a 5x7 format. And there's also going to be full page PDFs. And we'll have all kinds of discussion about the recipe. If you try it and you like it, or if you hate it, you can comment there. And that'll be up and running, hopefully by the time this video is. Okay, we're going to put our starfruit in a pan, put it on our burner, and then we'll add 500 grams of sugar, which is a little bit on the light side because I really don't want these overly sweet. And an optional thing is a little bit of lemon juice. So we're going to add roughly a tablespoon. And I say roughly because I'm going to use an actual tablespoon because I can't find my measuring spoon. And one, it's either in this studio or in my house, and I don't know which one. Now there's 1,429 grams of starfruit and 500 grams of sugar. Starfruit has a whole lot of water in it. So between the sugar and the water, we might have to boil this down for a few minutes. After they cook and get really soft, then we're going to mash them. Another optional ingredient I saw listed in several of the recipes that I looked at. This doesn't follow any exact recipe, by the way. This is derived from looking at several other recipes and deciding what sounded good, what didn't sound good. Even though I've never had this before, I'm pretty much a fussy eater, pretty much, he says. Now, I started to say another optional thing we're going to add is just a dash of cinnamon. Now, a lot of water's coming up now. When this gets soft, then I'm going to mash it. I'm kind of chopping this up with the spatula as I stir here because I think it'll make mashing easier. Tell you what, it smells good. Now, we've got all this liquid without any added liquid. Now, one recipe I saw wanted to add, I think it was a half a cup of liquid to a lot fewer starfruit than this. I think that would have been pretty much too much because we've got to boil this down until it's a jam consistency. Well, it's getting a little thicker. You can actually see that it's getting thicker, just as I can feel that it's getting thicker. I stir this every couple of seconds to make sure it doesn't start burning on the bottom. Anything with a lot of sugar in it has a tendency to burn on the bottom. It's finally beginning to look a lot more like jam, but it's still too drippy. It's mashing much better now than it did when I first did it. I'm going to add another tablespoon of lemon juice. This is really sweeter than I wanted it to be by a little bit. My original thoughts on this went with quite a bit more sugar than I actually did use, but then I decided that I would use less sugar, and if I needed, I could always add more sugar, but I really couldn't take sweetness out. Now this has been boiling down for about a half hour, 35 minutes. Again, as this reduces way down, you want to be sure to stir it more. I'm stirring pretty constantly because I really don't want any burned particles in it. Kind of sticking to the back of the spoon a little bit. It's still not exactly what I'd call jam. It'll tighten up some when it cools anyway. So it's just a question of figuring out at what point it's going to cool to the consistency that you really want. And I think we're getting very close to it. That's pretty thick stuff. So we're going to call it good at that. I'm going to try the masher at this point. Now I'll be back later after this is cooled off, so I can show you what exactly it finished off as. Here's the finished product, and I really don't know whether to call it a jam, preserves, or a spread. But I can tell you it's delicious.